Welcome back to another episode here on the Heart and Hustle podcast. We got Dr. Lewis in the building. What's up, mister?
Hello. How's it going?
Good, man. I'm super excited to be here with you to be able to talk so much more about just the healthcare in general. But first off, just let people know, what is the organization you represent?
Yeah, I represent Arcus Behavioral Health and Wellness. We are a 501c3 nonprofit community mental health agency based in Chicago.
Love it, man. How you get into that?
Well, I worked nonprofits, about 5 nonprofits prior, and I part of it is I haven't really liked the way a lot of nonprofits are run. I think that a lot of nonprofits have a lot of altruistic values, and that sometimes you question the decisions made by the leadership. And what I have found is it can be a bit exploitative of altruism. And people kind of go into these places really wanting to help people and then find that it's at great personal cost. And so my goal was to sort of like find best of both worlds, where we have this mission. We reorganize values that are focused on the mission and not self-interest, because in capitalism there's an inherent self-interest value that can get in the way of our social interests.
Obviously naming some people, what are some of the experiences that you've probably encountered in the journey?
Well, I mean, a lot, I think, not naming many places. I think, though, if I share some of the examples, it will resonate probably with a lot of your listeners in general. Sort of like laying people off who've been there more senior, and bringing on new people because it can pay them less. That's probably a common one. Maybe having an office in downtown, even though that's not really our target population. And you're sort of wondering why do we have this office? You know, I mean, and the general typical nonprofit experience of low salaries, low compensation, high caseloads, especially in mental health.
Love it. And why
Yeah.
did you choose mental health out of when you talk about nonprofit? What got you into mental health?
I was a pre-med student and was minoring in psychology, and was sort of working full time and in undergrad. And at some point, I was struggling with some of the coursework because also working, and I was also a foster parent. Long story, but and then I switched to psychology as a major and sociology as a minor, and I actually found I really enjoyed sociology more than psychology, honestly. But you don't get paid, to do sociology work unless you want to be a teacher or something, a professor. Um, so I sort of pursued the degree in psychology and went back working in banking. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm not about the banking life anymore either. And so I was like, I'm going to try to use my degree, which with a bachelor's in psychology, you can do basically nothing, you know. And so I was working at my first nonprofit, doing like case management, and I do speak Spanish. And I was working with a number of residents that were undocumented, pending cases. These were minors. And one of my coworkers there was going to grad school in Chicago. And she's like, why don't you become a therapist? And I'm like, huh. I mean, I do like Frasier at the time. And yeah, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could pursue that. And so I applied for the doctorate and didn't get into it. I got into the master's program, finished that, got my license, and was able to transfer into the doctorate program. And here we are.
Wow. And
Yeah.
did you have the I guess the foundation built for you already to go to school and get an education? Like, did parents already kind of say this is the path you're going, or you just realize this is how we're going to kind of get to the next level?
Like my own parents? Okay. No, I wouldn't say I've had that kind of backing, honestly. My family, we were on food stamps at a younger age. If anything, even to get through undergrad, I had to like get financial independence, going through financial aid department and sort of like share my trauma story of like why I deserve to be independent so that I don't have to include my parents' income.
Mm-hmm.
My parents were, ugh, yeah, we'll see how public this gets, but were the kind of people like, well, your education only benefits you, you know? And so why should we contribute to any of that? You know, I'm a firstborn, so I think for me, I was the first in my family to go to college and actually get a degree. Um, but no, I don't think that was my parents. If anything, I was trying to be different.
Trying to break the cycle. I
There you
mean,
go.
ideally,
There you
yeah,
go.
breaking the cycle, man. I want to kind of go back. You mentioned foster parents. Obviously,
Yeah.
me being in the system myself, what got you into that, man?
Oh my goodness, what a story. And I did it twice too. I part of it was when I was an undergrad, I was taking child psychology and a sociology class. The sociology was sociology of gender, which I was love that shit. I'm very fascinated about gender
Mm-hmm.
socialization. And part of the requirement for the child psychology class was to do some sort of like internship working with kids. And so I did an internship working at this place called the Child Abuse Council in Florida. And because I was also taking the sociology class, I was particularly fascinated about how childcare faculty socialize kids into gender sort of norms and how they may reward kids that adhere to gender norms. And they say things like, "Oh, are those your pigtails? Oh, you're so cute." And you sort of like reinforce that. And then they punish kids that deviate from gender norms. So boys, they're playing with girl things, and it was meant to be an observational study, and I did complete it. But I have always loved kids, and the director came to me and she's like, would you like to like become a preschool teacher? And I'm like, wow, maybe, I don't know, but what's the training involved? And then I guess in Florida the requirements are really low. And so I had to get some sort of like certification or something. It was like a 40-hour training thing. It wasn't even that crazy. And so then I got a job working there with a lot of these kind of kids that come from rather underprivileged homes, and got very attached to a couple of the kids. And basically I got involved in that path. It wasn't like an official foster care system. In Florida at the time, it was against the law for gay people to adopt. I believe that has changed, hopefully. But that wasn't actually a legal path for people like me.
Mm, wow. I how times have changed though. You just mentioned. What are you learning from those experiences? You said you fostered two kids. What are you learning through that journey?
What did I learn? Well, I mean, that it is really hard to be in the system. I think there are a lot of kids that really just want to be loved, and I think that I don't think I had the awareness at the time. I think now I look back and I'm like, oh, what was in the way of that? Um, and I attribute that to patriarchy. I attribute that to a society that doesn't put relationships first, puts other things first. Um, I think at the time, I don't think I had those insights. But yeah, but I actually have worked in child welfare since. I mean, years later, I worked at a child welfare agency in foster care, and I was the clinical director, and oversaw all the therapists, and not only the therapists that work with the kids, but even the parents who had to do things in order to get their kids back. So I was sort of responsible for all the clinical functions there.
Got
And it's
it. And
hard work, hard work. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Fast forward today, you're leading your own organization. What are some of the things and services that you guys are providing?
So our agency is, we have a kind of a unique business model. I think that I was trying to find best of both worlds. A lot of mental health is funded through insurance, but not everybody has insurance. And what you'll often find is that people that don't have to use insurance and they can pay out of pocket, they have access to a different kind of quality of care. They can talk about depression, but they also can talk about existential questions. They can talk about drag race, and they don't have to prove anything to anybody, in terms of establishing what's called medical necessity, which is sort of a arbitrary kind of concept developed by insurance companies that people have to prove that they deserve this treatment. And so that means people who don't have to use insurance and they can pay out of pocket, they have access to a wholly different type of healthcare. And it becomes a social justice issue because disproportionately, those are white people, cisgender, straight white people that have access to a different kind of quality of care. And everyone else has to prove they're deserving. And so our mission is to sort of bridge access to a different kind of quality of care. And that's not just focused on making people less miserable, but improving quality of life and well-being. And so we work with all people.
Yeah. I was talking to my mother-in-law about this whole having insurance and not. And I think people don't understand that even if you don't have insurance, there's still, it's actually, to me, I found this cheaper at times. So what is your thoughts on that, man? The whole not having insurance, being able to pay out of pocket idea versus going get insurance, having the deductible, having to meet the deductible. Like clearly you have a stance, it looks like, on what that looks like.
Healthcare is a human right. It should not be tied to employment. I think the whole make people work for Medicaid is absolute awful policy. I think that everyone is entitled to be treated with dignity. And that includes access to treatment and healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. How long have you been doing this, your own thing now, doctor?
I started Arcus in 2017.
Wow, almost 10 years now.
Yeah, I've been a therapist since 2008.
I graduated high school in 2008, doctor.
Oh my goodness.
No, man, I love it. I think you really talk about a lot of things. Obviously being adopted, there is those things that I've had to experience. The sexual abuse, I think I mentioned it to you on our first call. And even to this day, just having a little bit of conversation with my wife the other day, I still deal with all that trauma. And it is so hard, sometimes you mentioned it. I think some of the things I've experienced was feeling unseen, unloved. Obviously through the sexual abuse is something that doesn't go away, happen for years. It could be smells, it could be those things that come back. So I think it's something that a lot of people experience and may not talk about, and then may feel like they can't get the help because of everything you just mentioned, right? What is the stigma around seeing a therapist and getting the help? I think so many people, we've grew up in places where we didn't talk about this at home, right? And then you don't talk about it out in public because now you feel the shame to do so. I think for a long time, I didn't talk about it until I was 27 years old because of the feeling of someone would look at my sexuality different, right? What is your thoughts on that, man?
Yeah. Well, if I could just take a moment and just acknowledge what a model you are. Even sharing what you just did, that is a testament probably of your own growth, that you're able to kind of like share this, with a large audience. And it says that you're actively, have been working, on this. And part of trauma is not what happens to you. It's what happens inside of you, And so the hijacking, the avoidance, the not wanting to go there, that's trauma. People think trauma is like, oh, this happened and this happened. No. See, those are traumatic things that happened. But trauma is sort of like what lives in my nervous system. And how does it come out? How does it affect my body? How does it affect the way I see myself? How I relate to myself, how I relate to others? The sort of like cynicism that people can have, the skewing, So, and it's generally not super courageous, So like the fact that you're able to kind of go there, good for you. And that actually also answers your question. which is more people normalizing it, more
Yeah.
people talking about it.
I would tell you it's what gets me through it. Just recently, this past Friday, I felt like there was, I don't know why. I mean, I felt like there's growth happening in my life, and in order for me to not lose myself in this
Hmm.
growth, there's things to talk about.
Yeah.
And I've realized early on, because of sharing something as simple as being adopted, right? I had the opportunity to do that on national TV through Undercover Boss.
Okay.
And this is like early Facebook days, but seeing that people were reaching out, like, thank you for just being that voice.
Hmm.
When I started talking about sexual abuse, that I was
Yeah.
people that were 10, 20 years older than me
Yeah.
telling their stories for the first time. I
Mm.
realized it wasn't even about me, doctor.
Yeah.
It's about those that are still struggling
Yeah.
internally, that have not shared their story and feel like like they're maybe the problem, when in
Hmm.
reality, they're not.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times, man, when that weight is on my shoulders and I'm able to tell that story, I
Hmm.
think it really does help me because there's somebody
Yeah.
on the other side. And I always go to like, we think representation as male and a female, right? A man,
Yeah.
but it's really the stories that we tell. Realizing
Hmm.
that a lot more people than we
Hmm.
know are going through this.
Hmm.
So I think
Yeah.
that's what gets me over it. Makes me tell that story is realizing that it's not even about me. It's that I tell this
Yeah.
story and
Yeah.
the other person feels comfortable enough to share
Yeah.
something they've never shared with anybody. And what
Hmm.
that does for them
Hmm.
internally to realize,
Hmm.
like, oh, I'm not alone in this world. Do you
Hmm.
agree that's why we should tell more stories and we should be
Hmm.
more open?
Yeah, I do. And also, relationships are everything. Um, I have my own model of therapy, and it's all about how to foster healthy relationships. One of the better predictors of if someone goes on to develop PTSD is not the traumatic event. It's, do you have people who have emotional access to you that you're able to really share, for them to actually give a shit about your
Hmm.
emotional experience, to attend to it? Or are you alone? That is sort of the predictor if you go on to get PTSD. It really does come down to relationships, not preventing the events themselves.
How do people that I guess are dealing with this internally, how do they start to share that story? How do they, because there's a lot of walls that are being put up because of their life experiences, right? And it's very hard to say something and not feel judged. What do you say they start?
Yeah. Well, I would say they need to be the thing that they are, wanting, And so when part of this model I've been working on is, what does healthy sound like? What does it feel like? I have this concept called relational self leadership. And what that means is, it's sort of like not only how we relate to ourselves and our own parts, but how do we relate to other people's parts, and can we, you know, let our core drive. The core of us is compassionate, connected, curious. How do you know that's the core? Because that's what young kids are. They're curious, they're compassionate, they're needy, they're unapologetically authentic. Young kids, of course. And then it gets like, figuratively or literally beaten out of them. And, that's what we're trying to like let drive. Not these protector parts, not these parts that are like, oh, I don't want to take that risk. What if, you know? Um, and I would say that part of the work is for us to be that person, that kind, responsive person who responds to emotions with curiosity, with validation, who's mindful about their own judgmental parts. And then when you are doing that and you are actively, embodying that, and you're also getting feedback, hey, how was your experience with me? How is that how you're experiencing me? You know, am I responding to your emotions with curiosity and validation, especially our primary relationships? Well, now you can have higher expectations of those around you. And when you interface with people who can't do that, who respond with judgment or contempt, and they're like, oh, who does that? Whatever it is, that's more about them.
Hmm. Do you think that parents could be overprotective? because of their own trauma?
Yes. I think you know that too.
I do. I just, someone that's an expert, I can say it, but if it's coming for you, you're the doctor, not me.
Oh, okay. No, yeah.
No, I do. Really something funny you mentioned. I wouldn't say funny, but you mentioned about boys. I have a son and a daughter. Obviously, I had my daughter
Okay.
first, so I have a
Okay.
5-year-old and a 2-year-old. So my
Nice.
2-year-old, looking at his sister, wants to put on the mermaid dress, wants to be everything that his sister wants to be. Ideally, I could be the parent that says, you are not going to do that because, boys don't do that. But my son would, we just came back from Arizona. He says, I miss my mermaid dress. I miss, it has a little toy mermaid. And to me, I think a lot of times I could have gone based off my trauma and some of the things I've experienced and says no, because I don't want you to be XYZ.
Right.
But kind of
Yeah.
to what you mentioned, if we sit here and then start to say this, don't do this, are they not going to kind of lean more into that because now they're like curious? You're talking about curiosity.
Got you.
Is
I think
that
eventually,
where we're at?
Yeah. I think eventually that you're gonna rebel. Anyway, but no, I think the core is also courageous, and I think that what you're talking about, these 7 parts driving, including in parents, are worried parts. Actually, I have a story for you. This actually happened like a Christmas ago. I was at the toy store, and it happened right in front of me. This maybe 6-year-old boy goes to his mom, and he's like, "Mom, look!" And mom looked back and sort of shot this look of disgust, and she tells this boy, "That is a girl's toy. Put that back." Okay, this is one of those, like, I don't know, origin stories where this child who's like, driving in this core self is now fragmenting into parts. One of the parts is shame. What is shame? Shame is I'm being disconnected from. Mom, who's usually by my side, is now pushing me away and responding with disgust. All right. And so what does he do with that shame? Well, he has this part now that's sort of questioning, what am I doing that's causing, and by the way, he's young, developmentally egocentric, which means he's going to take it personal. He's going to think it's about him. So what other things come up as a result of that? Well, now he has another part come up, a manager part that's like, oh, I better not say that. I better not share this. I better not do that. He might have a worried part as well, right? And that will be the way he's going to navigate his relationship with his mom going forward. He also might have a critical part starting activated, like, oh, wow, what's wrong with me that I like this? That's gross. Mom's grossed out at you. Okay, let's not just focus on this kid. I mean, obviously it's so easy to, but mom is also having parts. Mom is also responding with parts. Mom has a part in that moment. Maybe a disgusted part. But where's that come from? Probably her own experiences of disconnection or worry. What are people going to say? Oh my God. If my child, is he going to be gay? Is he going to be trans? And this worried part is now driving, but there's origins to those as well, those parts, right? And her own experiences of being shamed. There's also this fear of being shamed that she also has. Yeah. And sometimes our parts are just interacting with each other. And what I'm saying, what leadership is you notice those parts, but you drive. What does that mean? The core of us is compassionate and curious and courageous and connected and wise and forgiving. Right? I don't know if that answers your question, but yes.
I would say, how did this all come about? Like, clearly you're very passionate about this. You decided to give your life to this, right? To make sure that you can help the next person experience it. Because you're so right. Like, that's how the walls start to really get created, right? When we talk about I mean, one of the biggest things for me being a father, not having
Mm-hmm.
a father, and being a
Mm-hmm.
father
Yep.
is that I wanted to always make sure I can be myself, allow someone to be themselves, and allow them to share anything and without shame, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
As I was an early parent, I found myself telling my young child to use her
Yeah.
voice, to speak up, to say
Nice.
what's on, and realizing that I didn't do that in my life though, right? So practicing what I preach. So I had to
Mm-hmm.
go back to my mother that raised me and
Okay.
tell her how I felt and how I felt alone and how she made me, first time in my life. But I had to do it because who am I to tell someone to do this? And I couldn't do it. Right. And one of the things that she mentioned to me was like, I'm so sorry. I did the best I could with what I knew. At that moment, realizing that people just are not educated. They're just
Yeah.
kind of ignorant to
Yep.
situations.
Yep.
It could be they don't know resources exist for some of these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
to me,
Well,
I'm learning what you're saying
yeah.
today. I'm learning from you as well. But I can imagine there was things that you've had to learn that got you to a point that says, "This is what I want to do in my life. I want to create an organization around this. I want to create new models that actually work." Or not just taking money from people and kind of keeping them in system, but
Yeah.
allowing them to grow from the system.
Yeah.
I mean, where does that come from,
Yeah.
doctor?
I mean, truly, it comes from experiences of healthy relationships. I do.
Hmm.
I have two kids of my own. I don't know if I mentioned that. Yeah. 4 and a 6-year-old, right now. I just turned 6. And, I'm also married. And, I think that part of my hope for people, this sounds a little funny, perhaps. But I want people to have what I have with my husband.
Hmm.
I want them to experience that deep sense of connection that you feel like, I don't know. Actually, I'll tell you a quick story. I was getting dinner with and we'll see if this person watches this podcast. But I was getting dinner with a coworker who is our development director. And they were saying to me, like, Lewis, you don't have enough imagination because Arcus could be so big, it could be so huge, it could be like the premier mental health agency, whatever. And I didn't like the idea. I couldn't quite articulate why, so I went home and I was telling my husband about it. And I was saying, yeah, Tony thinks I should we should like make Arcus huge and we should so on and so forth. And my husband's like, of course you don't want that. Of course you don't want to get farther away from the work itself, grow this agency so that you don't have real relationships with the people you work with, be this different version of yourself. And my response was like, oh my God, you know me so well. And I actually wrote a chapter in my book about this and from my experience of the power of being deeply known, of having a relationship where this person knows you more than you fucking know yourself. And they're able to articulate that. They're able to say, oh, I know, I see you. And that is also, incidentally, the only way we ever believe we're worthy.
Hmm.
Because this person who knows me so well, they know all the things. They know all the ugly stuff, all the
Hmm.
parts that we don't even want to wish we had or whatever. And they're still saying you are worthy and you are loved.
Yeah.
That is the only way we ever believe we're worthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. And a healthy relationship, there's a reciprocity there.
Hmm.
You're doing that for each other. You're
Yep.
making that relationship your number one priority. And I know you're talking to me like all these accomplishments. No, the biggest accomplishment I have is my relationship.
Hmm.
And that experience is what inspires me to have other people also have this. And actually, that's the core of my model therapy as well, which is I want to have a real relationship with my client where they experience that care. They experience that emotional curiosity and it raises the bar of what it can be like. But you're not just like, what I don't want to happen is people leave the therapy session and be like, wow, Lewis is such a nice guy. No, I want to be like, oh, wow, here's what he did. And here's what I need to do in my relationships. I need to be more curious. One more story for you. This whole judgmental thing you had mentioned earlier, it's actually kind of relevant to therapy. One of my supervisees was saying to me one day that in supervision that she was feeling guilty because she was judging a client. I'm like, oh, okay. Were you explicitly judgmental? And she's like, oh no. I'm like, okay. So were you having judgmental thoughts? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. And you were a good Christian, and pure thoughts is what you needed to do. And we laughed and so on and so forth. But then we got into a conversation about what is the purpose of therapy here, you know? And she's like saying, well, the way that we're trained, which is true, that, therapy is supposed to be this safe space, judgment free. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. But is that because a therapist doesn't experience judgment? Or is it because they notice judgment, but they choose the relationship first?
Mm-hmm.
They don't let the judgmental part drive. And that's what makes it safe, you know? And then the goal is for clients to internalize that and do that shit in their own lives. So they don't let the judgmental part drive first. They choose the relationship first. They choose curiosity. They choose compassion. If they notice a critical part driving, they're like, you know what? That was a little critical. What was your experience of that? Let me be curious towards this critical part. Maybe there's something I'm worried about. Maybe I care about you and I want to acknowledge it this way. And that is just the model that we have not experienced that we need. What do you think?
So good. So good. A lot of things that you're saying is like, I can really relate. The judging, right? Literally
Mm-hmm.
recently, someone asked me a question about my wife, and I said, she never judged me for who I am, right?
Okay.
You mentioned all these stories. Like, I was almost a faucet to her and almost dropped everything at her front door. And one of the things she said before we even got together, even if we don't work out, I still want to help you overcome some of these things.
Yeah.
I still want to make sure that you're good in life. Of
Yeah.
course, I married her because of those exact words. But she also loved me more than I loved myself at that moment.
Okay.
Right? She helped me overcome a lot of these things. And then so
Mhm.
recently, what I talked about last week, someone asked me, said that to me. And I remember saying, she never judged me. And I had to
Yeah.
remember that. And I told her some more things and she's like, I already knew that. Because I don't know if you know, you told me some of these things, but I was also reading between the lines, right?
Okay.
But I was still carrying on thinking
Yeah.
the pressure, like, what would
Mhm.
she think of me? Right.
Right.
So it
Mhm.
is when one, we have to be open in our relationships,
Yep.
because the reason
Yep.
sometimes we can't overcome things is because
Right.
we're in our own way,
Yeah.
because we're holding on to things that are really not even us. It was
Yeah.
the past version of us. It was that
Right.
young version of us. It was
Mhm.
the the trauma that we have that we're still holding on to, that ideally wasn't our fault,
Mhm.
but
Yep.
we feel that, it was us and people are going to judge. So, I mean, you're
Yeah.
dead on, bro. I love everything that you're saying because I can relate to them. And I do. Every time I speak to other couples, I do hope that they can also not just, and I've seen this in some friends where they get mad at one another and they won't talk to each other there, right? And
Mhm.
for weeks, how
Yeah.
good is that in a relationship? Right?
No,
Let's
it's
talk
not.
through it. Let's figure out why
Yeah.
are we at this point in our lives.
Yeah.
So I think you're good. Let's talk
Causes.
about this
Yeah.
book though, man. This book,
Okay.
you got a book out,
Yeah.
doctor?
Well, it's not out. It's a model I've been working on. And I'm putting it into a book. And the purpose is to put into words what I do with my clients.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these are not all original ideas. I'm sort of taking from different models, but with a newer purpose, which is sort of like, how do I foster healthy relationships? What does healthy look like and feel like? You know, and what gets in the way of these things? I think one of the problems with mental health, among many, is we make it a very individual experience, probably because of our cultural values of like, individualism and whatnot, self-determination, very American. But truly, our health is inherently tied to our relationships. There is no mental health without healthy relationships. Full stop. But that's not what insurance companies pay for. Insurance
True.
companies are going to pay for you to be functional, less depressed, so you can get back out there and work for the white man and make him money.
Stay
It's
in the
not
system
about,
per se.
yeah, it's not collective well-being,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so I've been trying to put together, sort of synthesizing these different things. One of the things that I have been sort of talking about, I have a TikTok channel. I've been doing a lot of these videos lately on caste and racism and patriarchy and how those things get in the way of fostering healthy relationships, not just with my partner, but with my neighbor, with immigrants who are being hunted, and the lack of compassion and curiosity that we show, the sort of like hierarchy of groups and caste that we have. We have our own caste system here, where we are not curious. The burden of curiosity is on the most marginalized. They need to understand the people with more power. But people with more power don't have to give a shit about anyone beneath them. And so it's much more a model about relational health. And it's not just about how to do therapy. Although the power I have is, what does it look like in the therapy room? Research says that therapists have a higher divorce rate than the general public, which is kind of crazy. And my goal is to no, but I actually want to have healthy relationships with my clients, with my employees, with my husband, with my kids. I believe we have to lead and not just intervene and do these little do this thing and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You mentioned values when you started that. What are your values today?
Well, that's probably a theme of a lot of the videos I've been doing recently, which is I believe that healthy is reorganizing values, which is a little radical because the way therapists are trained is we're not supposed to impose values on clients. In fact, it's literally in the American Counseling Association Code of Ethics, which is you don't impose your values on clients. But I just think that is utter bullshit because I think we're going to do it. If you're trying to get your client to be curious towards their emotions, you are imposing a value. You're saying emotions have value. They're important. That's imposing a value. Now, I understand why that ethic came to be because there are certain values that can be harmful, like puritanical, purity cultural values. Yeah. So I understand why it came to be, but I think it is missing a lot of nuance. I believe healthy is the active, mindful reorganizing of values and putting healthy relationships first. If you look at the anti-racism movement and you understand racism, capitalism and the values of capitalism is at the core of racism. It is self-interest. And so we have to actively choose to put relationships over self in a healthy relationship, whether it's with my partner or my staff, my organization, or my society. That's what I mean by that.
As a leader, who's pouring into you? I know your husband is one, your kid's another, but while the noise is getting loud, who's really just pouring into Dr. Lewis to make sure that because you're a therapist, but a therapist needs a therapist. A therapist needs someone that they can go to. Who's that for you?
It's my husband. Part of my model, and this is a bit of a belief of mine, is that a healthy relationship promotes growth. And in my opinion, and I don't know if this is a thing, but we'll see. The ideal is to have a primary relationship that feels therapeutic. You want your partner to sort of, how maybe you don't know this, but a lot of therapists are trained that you don't do therapy with friends and family. I think that's bullshit. Now, maybe in a psychoanalytic way of I'm not going to do all that, but what I will do is I'm going to be real. I'm going to be emotionally curious. I'm going to be introspective and vulnerable. And if that is what doing therapy is, well, yeah, absolutely. We need to be doing that with our kids, with our partners. And the curiosity is the primary vehicle of that growth. And so I need to be curious and have high expectations of curiosity towards me. I can't ask for what I'm not willing to give. And through that curiosity and making connections, there's also this compassion piece of I'm kind of wondering about this. I'm wondering about if this is helpful to you, and so you're growing. And there's plenty of times where that's been the case with me and stuff I've had to I've also experienced sexual abuse, and my own experience of oh, this is coming up and needing my husband to be curious, holding space, holding me accountable, perhaps, when my parts are driving and they're causing harm. The things that kept me safe in more shitty relationships are now causing harm in new relationships.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
I
But it goes
literally
back
just
and
told my
forth.
wife that. Yeah, yeah. I literally told my wife that there's those things that you, not you per se, but maybe myself, were doing in those quiet times that were created by those moments of hurt and pain that ideally are not good for me or good for my relationship.
Mm,
And you don't even realize it until someone holds you accountable, right?
yeah.
Because it becomes the norm to you. But when someone
Yeah.
does, of
Yep.
course, it probably like, what do you mean? And you
Yeah.
automatically want to get to that point, but realizing, wait, they may be onto something. And when you really start to think about it and you work on it, you do
Oof.
see the benefit of it in your relationship. So, I mean,
Yeah.
Dr. Lewis, you're dropping gems in this conversation. I truly do appreciate you being as
Oh
open and
man.
honest as you've been, man. What are some other things that you're just most, as we start to wrap up, what are the things that
Yeah.
you're most just happy about that you've been able to accomplish since starting this new journey and this new agency that you've created?
Well, I want to answer that. Maybe I can tie it into another quick point, if I may, because you had mentioned being a parent, and it's a good example of like the growth. I think that having children is quite a test of self-compassion.
Mhm.
And part of it is the things that we have historically disliked about ourselves can manifest in our kids. And the way that we've historically related to ourselves can be projected onto our kids. And the example I have is sensitivity. My 6-year-old, who is biologically my child, is very sensitive, and she feels those feelings very deeply. And so did I, and do I. Now, as a male, I've gotten different messages about that. And then, recently, actually, it was probably a couple years ago, so not recent, but I had a situation where I was like really in my shame space of like, ugh, I hate feeling my feelings so deeply. I hate being so sensitive. And my husband, who is very kind and curious and is like, trying to be helpful, he pointed out our child. And he's like, look at this child. She feels those feelings so deeply. She's sort of slow to warm, but when she loves her whole heart. When people leave, she feels that grief. She feels that loss. Are you going to shame her for that? Are you going to make her feel bad about feeling that way? And I'm like, ugh. Like that makes so much fucking sense. And I'm like, ugh,
Yeah.
this is a lesson for me, also in this. And that's just an example of how our partner, who has our best interests, but requires us to have humility to listen too. Yeah. Anyway.
I love it.
Yeah.
For those that may be struggling mentally, that are watching this, listening
Mm,
to this, and really want to start the journey of finding themselves, their authentic selves, where do
mm.
they start?
Well, I would say if there are any relationships where you feel a bit more authentic, a bit have that chemistry, where you feel like you can be a bit more yourself, um, that would be a good place to start and sort of like lean into that, be able to talk about the relationship, whether it's a friend, a coworker, maybe a partner, someone, you're seeing, um, be curious about their experience. What is your experience of our relationship? Be able to talk about our relationship is a big part of it. And I think being that the thing that they want. I mean, we want someone to be curious. We want someone to be engaged and responsive and accessible, but we got to be those things, And so if you have that relationship, that is the experimental space to really try to be a bit more real, emotionally honest, emotionally authentic. I don't mean like, because I did get fired from a philosophy professor once about authenticity. He's like, what is authentic anyway? And I'm like, oh God, here we go. But like emotional authenticity, that you're really owning your emotional impact and experience. I don't mean letting the critical parts drive in total radical honesty. That's not the ideal, you know. But this person cares about my emotional experience and I care about theirs. And you lean into that and you try to replicate that, whether it's with your coworkers or if you're an employer, you try to be the thing that you need. That's the leadership. That's relational self-leadership ultimately.
How about we talk about the other side, the individual that realizes someone needs that, but maybe there's some walls up. How do you approach that?
Whew. I mean, probably take another hour on that one, but I mean, well, because some people are, you can be accessible. You can be. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I've had a job interview with somebody and be like, "Oh my god, the interview changed my life," and I'm like, "Okay, sure, Jan." But like sometimes that small interaction allows people to have that experience, and that can plant a seed. But I mean, you're sort of like living your authenticity. And you're sort of giving a model, And some people are not going to like that, by the way. People get threatened by authenticity. Some people have those
Absolutely.
fake parts driving hardcore. And when you're authentic, they're like, what's wrong with this person? See, like that, I mean, that could be very polarizing. But when you're okay, I forgot one of the C's in the core. It's confident. There's a confidence in the core, unapologetically authentic in terms of emotional honesty, right? And so you have that grounded, and you're a model for people, and you're not necessarily trying to help them. We don't want our helper part to drive necessarily. I mean, you can, but that's not the goal. The goal is connection, not to help. Which that I'll just stop. Change therapy right now. It's not about helping; it's about connecting.
One thing that you mentioned is confident, and I think early on in my life, people would say, "You're so cocky." And my response to them was, "No, I'm confident."
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a difference.
Yeah.
And I think that people could definitely look at confidence and think you're full of yourself.
Right.
But that's because they struggle to be confident and authentic with themselves. So when someone else may come across, as this confident person, to them, it just seems as that. Have you ever experienced that on your own?
Oh, I mean,
I'm trying to let you go, but you're just dropping so much good stuff. We got to keep going. We got to keep going.
I get it. Well, you know what? I'm 6'4". I'm a firstborn. I have a lot of privilege, and I don't want to make it sound like confidence is a personal choice. Caste also plays a role into confidence. People are socialized to believe they're better or worse than other people. And it's not a coincidence that the most confident are the most privileged, So I'm not trying to absolve me like, oh, well, you just got to be more confident. Okay, first off, people can internalize that inferiority. A lot of my confidence that I have, I didn't just choose. So that's part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I'm a male. We have a society that props men up to be they're rewarded for confidence. And so it's a personal choice. I wouldn't want to make it sound like complete self-determination. But I will say that a young child does have a level of confidence. No 1-year-old is worried about being a burden. They're going to confidently tell you what they're thinking and feeling.
No filter. You're right.
Yeah.
Dr. Lewis, I thank you so much for your time, man. Where could people find more information on what you're doing? You mentioned social. So what is that social, TikTok wise, maybe other ones, but also the website. People can really look into more of these services that you're providing.
Absolutely. Yeah. We actually provide services across 43 states. Forgot to mention that. So we actually can work with people almost across United States, including Florida. And I have Arcus behavioralhealth.com. That's the main website. ARCUS behavioralhealth.com. So you can learn more about us there. I'm on TikTok at Dr. Lewis V. Haynes. And you'll see a lot of content on there and a lot expanding probably some of the things we talked about today.
Love it. Well, Dr. Lewis, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being authentically you, bringing
likewise.
Literally authentically yourself to this podcast, because that's really what we love to do, is talk to leaders that are genuinely themselves. A lot of times, and people like to put on a mask. under that mask, there's still so much hurt, there's still so much pain, and then they put that
Mm,
on others. Clearly, you've been able to work on yourself and realize it's not even about you. It's about the person that's across from me, making sure that they can live the
mhm.
life that I've been able, and in your case, you've been able to experience. And I love that. I love that about you. And you guys are still watching, listening, whatever that may look like. Make sure you guys check out Dr. Lewis on TikTok so you can see more of this content on a daily basis. I'm Efrain. This is Dr. Lewis. And we'll catch you on the next one. Later.
Thank you.